Okay, I'm going to spotlight our finale speaker this week, everybody. It's been a fantastic week of Christmas goodness.
Woo!
This is Tina Curran. Okay, Tina is from San Diego, you just told me.
Studio City, California. It's outside of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Okay, Tina, her interest is in making art quilts. It was jump-started when she saw her wonderful friend Sarah take a variety of patterned fabrics, cut them into pieces, and combine them in an artistic way. She's a lifelong sewer, starting from the Girl Scouts. Wow. She loves quilting. One of the great thrills with quilting or art form is the options are infinite. Similar to a painter working on a canvas, she enjoys both the deep American roots of traditional quilting and the unlimited possibilities of today's art quilts that's happening right now. Combining elements of both extremes are great fun. She uses contemporary fabrics and century-old quilts. Her art quilts have been on display in multiple art shows and quilt shows, as well as in national quilt magazines, and also in 3 books, possibly more by now. She has no formal art training, but she's taken wonderful classes over the years, and she loves to learn, and she spent 10,000 or more hours making more than 125 art quilts to date, which I think is probably more by now.
Yeah.
She has a shop on Etsy. We will put the link in the chat for everybody. And welcome, Tina Curran.
Why, thank you. Can you see, I actually have my Christmas lights up and on. I've got my Christmas necklace on. I went with a red t-shirt, not a red sweater, because it is July and it's going to be 90 degrees today. But I want to show you that I am in the swing of things. I do love Christmas. And as I was telling folks when I got on, that I actually make a new Christmas quilt. I design and make a new Christmas quilt every year. And so that's what I'm going to walk you through today. But first, let me start by sharing my screen and give you a little bit more. Thank you for the introduction. I'll even tell you a little bit more about me. So here we are, Christmas in July with IAQ. I've been quilting for over 25 years. I definitely did start sewing with the Girl Scouts. And in my quilting career, I began designing quilts pretty early on. My work's been published in more than 20 quilt magazines. And once that happened, I started selling patterns myself. I sell them on Etsy. I've had a shop there for several years, and I'm considered a top tier seller with a 5-star rating and over 3,500 sales. I'm also a quilt lecturer and a workshop teacher. I get hired by guilds to speak at their meetings. I'm also hired by those guilds to teach workshops to their members. And then I just recently launched a series of Zoom workshops that anyone can sign up for, individuals or groups of friends, but more on that later. Okay, so for today's meeting, as I said, I want to walk you through my series of Christmas quilts. So what I did, I've cobbled together an all new presentation. I borrowed some slides from my virtual trunk show, and I've also borrowed slides from my design process lecture, added in some new stuff, and that's what I'll walk you through. So let me give you the backstory. For the last 17 years, I've made a Christmas themed quilt every year that serves as the artwork of that year's holiday card. Everyone so far has featured at least one tree. So that's really kind of the only rule. After that, pretty much anything goes as long as it's got a holiday look. So I started in 2004. This was the first one. This was not my design. I used someone else's pattern. It's a 54-inch square, just made with regular piecing. It's based on a pattern by an Australian quilter, Jan Mullen. She was big maybe 10, 15 years ago. She's kind of moved on to other media for artwork now, but her patterns were super fun, super wonky, and her books are great. And actually, I met her. I've taken a class in person from her. Thoroughly enjoyed her. This is the close-up, so you can see these wonky presents. All her patterns are pretty wonky. It's got wonky presents in the border, but then you can also see there's some that are stitched into the quilting. This was the first time I actually left the ditch and did a little free motion quilting. So this quilt was very popular with little kids because, of course, they liked the presents. And then when I showed them that there were hidden secret presents, that was even better. The next year, I did I created Tree Farm. This is more of an oblong quilt. It was made using regular piecing. This one actually appeared in an issue of Quilt Maker magazine, and it sold off my Etsy site to a couple in New York City who bought this, and actually they bought another one of my quilts. This one, you can see how it's made. I basically made strip sets with green fabrics, cut them into triangles, and then cut similar size triangles out of white fabrics with a black motif, sewed them together, and then I believe the trunks of the trees are raw edge applique. My third one, 2006, I called Oh Christmas Tree. This is probably the smallest one at a 34-inch square. Again, regular piecing. This was actually based on a pattern by an American quilter by the name of Lisa Boyer. Her brand is That Dorky Homemade Quilt. The pattern I bought from her had kids like this, but they were wearing hula gear. The gals had like a bikini top and a skirt, I believe, and then the guys just had like bare chests and trunks. So obviously for Christmas they needed a little bit more clothing on, so I changed the clothes, but I kept the kids as they were. You can see the boys have little bowl haircuts, and then you add extensions for the girls. 2007, Dancing Trees. This quilt made a lot of noise for me. It's a 48-inch square. It was made using paper piecing, and this was the first quilt of mine that ever went to the International Festival of Quilts, otherwise known as Houston. It also appeared in an issue of Quilter's Newsletter, and it appeared in Quilter's Newsletter because one of the editors from Quilter's Newsletter was actually at Houston and saw it and contacted me to ask if it was an original pattern. Here's the close-up on this one. You can see the trees all come together to share a star in the middle, and then that star is shared in the corners of the quilt. Another repeating motif is you can see the background fabric for the trees also shows up in the checkerboard that serves as the border for the quilt. In 2008, I came up with 46 mittens and only one matching pair. I grew up in the Midwest with 3 siblings, and so you were lucky if you ever found a matching pair of mittens to go out with. Basically, you know, just pick 2 off the top of the pile and went out. This one was made using some paper piecing, some regular piecing, and it actually caused a traffic jam at my guild's quilt show because, given the title, everyone was trying to find the one matching pair of mittens. In the close-up, you can see here's what the mittens look like. And there are truly 46 and only one matching pair. You can also see the kind of wonky stars that make up the quilt. And on the right, you can see how the quilting kind of emanates from the star on top of the tree and echoes out from there. 2009, this is a controversial one. This is Christmas Tree of Life. It's square, it's paper pieced, and I call it my most polarizing quilt because people either really like it or have told me, not one of their favorites. My problem with this one is that it didn't live up to my vision. I wanted to do a whole bunch of spirals. The spirals were supposed to be far denser. It wasn't supposed to be such a spare looking tree. But again, I make these quilts. They basically have to be done by December 1st because I've got to do the photography. I've got to have the cards made. I have to get the cards out. So I basically ran out of time. Here is the close-up, and you can see the spirals. The larger spirals are made with fabric, then the smaller ones are thread only. So if I had had more time, I just would have done more of the thread ones. What's funny about this is that the spirals are made based off of a pattern or a methodology by Renee Merrill, if you know that name. She's big into spirals. I had signed up to take her class in January of 2010 about making spirals. I bought her book in the fall of 2009, ended up using her methodology to make that year's Christmas quilt. So when I showed up to her class, supposedly to learn the technique in January, I already had this quilt that I showed her. And she's like, you're here to learn? I'm like, well, I'm sure you can teach me more. What's also funny about this quilt is to talk more about its polarizing effect. It's called Christmas Tree of Life because, as you may know, spirals are an ancient symbol for life. But when this was hanging at my guild's show, I happened to walk by when some person read the title and then commented, no, more like Nightmare Before Christmas. So I like to think, you know what, art is subjective. You can't please everyone. So then the following year, I was still playing with spirals. This is Christmas Tree of Life 2. This one was made with regular piecing and then some machine applique. This one appeared in an issue of Quilter's newsletter. And in the close-up, you can see that the border is pieced. And then the way I made those spirals was I cut long pieces, long strips of fabric on the diagonal, spliced them together, turned the edges under, and then coiled them up and tacked them down with clear thread and a zigzag stitch. 2011 Christmas flag. I make, when I'm not making Christmas quilts, I love to make flag quilts. So the fact that I make American flag quilts and I make Christmas quilts, it was inevitable that a Christmas flag would result. So this is one of my bigger ones. It's 52 by 80 inches wide. It is all paper pieced. It appeared in an issue of Quilter's newsletter, and I had already been working with them for a few years, and this one kind of stumped them because up until this point, they had allocated maybe 2, maybe 4, maybe 6 pages to one of my designs, but this one would have required the entire issue. So fortunately, their website was gearing up. So what they ended up doing is I think I have 2 pages in the magazine, and then the rest of the motifs were rolled out online every couple of weeks. So I do have, like a true American flag, I do have actually 50 trees up in the upper left corner. And then I do have 13 stripes as well, obviously each one with a different Christmas motif. This pattern is available for sale on quiltingdaily.com. Quiltingdaily.com is what used to be the Quilting Company, which is what used to be Quilter's newsletter. So that's now their online hub. Let me show you a close-up of this. Here you can see how I had fun with embellishments. I put rickrack on the gingerbread men. I put some yellow beads in the middle of the poinsettias. I put little tiny pom-poms on the end of the Santa hats, and on the presents in that bottom row, I used real ribbon to wrap the presents. In 2012, I did my Christmas album. Now, this is my take on a Baltimore album quilt. If you're familiar with Baltimore album quilts, one thing that makes them unique is that each block is different. So here I do have 9 different blocks, each with a different holiday motif, but probably unlike most Baltimore album quilts, I have a border made up of Christmas sweaters. And that's because, again, growing up in the Midwest with 3 sisters, Christmas sweaters, or just sweaters in general, was a very popular and cherished present. This also appeared in Quilter's newsletter, and so they sell it. The pattern is for sale at quiltingdaily.com. When I made this, I made all the sweaters. This is made with raw edge applique, so I made all the sweaters first and then later put them on. And I made more than I needed because I wanted to be able to play around with them and figure out which ones look best next to each other. I ended up with, I think, 4 that didn't fit on the back, so actually they ended up on the sleeve. And then on the right, you can see, again, I had the quilting like echoing out from the center motif, which was on that one, candy canes. In 2013, I created First Snow. This is 15 homes decked out for the holidays. It's paper pieced. It also appeared in Quilter's newsletter. And it was on my shop on Etsy for not too long when a man bought it. A guy from Atlanta bought it for his wife for Christmas, and he had a funny tale because he told me that his wife had been drooling over this. So, but it was very close to Christmas, and he was worried he'd get it in time. So I said, how about this? I will gift wrap it so it's ready to go right out of the box, but you've got to give me carte blanche to figure out what the shipping's going to be in order to get it there in time. So that deal was made, and he later let me know that his wife was bereft when she saw it was off my Etsy site, because of course, once it's sold, it's off. She was horrified that it was going to end up somewhere else, but then was, of course, delighted to find it as a gift for herself under her own Christmas tree. This one is also, yes, available for sale on quiltingdaily.com. Here's 2 of the houses, 2 of the 15. I had lots of fun with a lot of embellishments. You can see I made little picket fences Then I made some little garlands and bows to decorate the picket fences. Found, I guess I drew that, maybe I found it on Pinterest, that snowflake motif made out of fabric. And then on the right, I made little candles to put in the windows. And those candy canes were just cut out of another holiday fabric and then rouge appliqued on either side of that door. I call this first snow because of that polka dot fabric I used in the back. It looks to me like snow falling at night, and it's got to be the first snow because there's no piles of snow on the ground. There's no accumulation yet, so it's got to be the first snow. Following year, I did Christmas surprises. This is paper pieced. It also appeared in Quilter's newsletter, so it's for sale on quiltingdaily.com. This one, you can see the little curly cues on the sides of the tree. Those are made basically using like a snail's trail methodology. And this is one where I had a lot of fun using holiday fabrics that had novelty prints. So you can see on the left and on the right, all the ornaments have a novelty holiday print in them. You could also see on the left that top of the curly cues, which was that snail's trail type of pattern. On the top of the tree, I used gold and silver lame for the star on top of the tree. And I use gold and silver lame in a number of my Christmas quilts. As long as you back them with some lightweight interfacing, they'll behave just fine and work just like a cottonwood. On the right, you can also see in that photo, I've got some metallic garlands. That's just some trim that I found at a fabric store. And I pinned it in place and then I tacked it down using a zigzag stitch and clear thread. Then the following year is Wreath-A-Rama. That's the middle quilt behind me. This became a big focus of my design lecture. As a quilt pattern designer, I get asked very often if these ideas just come to me fully formed. And of course, the answer is no. So people wanted to understand my process. So I put a design lecture together. And when I was making this quilt, I made a point of taking a million pictures along the way so I could explain my process. In my design lecture, I go through each one of these blocks and how it was made. But since I'm really truncating for today's purposes, I'm just going to walk you through the highlights of one of them. The goal had been, as you can see, these are each 9 wreaths, each with a different holiday motif. Leading up to this quilt, I had had a lot of quilts that had multiple motifs. What I was trying to do is figure out, was there one holiday motif that was a shape that I could put every other holiday motif in? And the wreath seemed to be the one to make the most sense, hence the title Wreath-A-Rama. So that was the humble wreath shape that I was working with. As for the snowman block, the challenge for this block was one of contrast, because of course you've got a traditionally white item, and I was using basically a white background fabric. So I decided if I used light blue colored fabric, that should work. It will still read as a snowman. And with that settled, then I had to rough out what was going to be the placement of my snowman. This was my first draft. And again, just rough placement. You can see the wreath shape that I'm trying to work in. The problem with arranging them this way is you can see the snowman on the top, bottom, right, and left, or north, south, east, and west. They're 3 tiers. They've got a head, a torso, and a base. But the ones in the corner get kind of squeezed out, and there's only room for a head and a base, which I didn't like. So I rejected that. I kept designing, and I ended up tilting them all so they all kind of leaned back against each other. And this way, I was going to be able to have them each have a head, a torso, and a base. So that was the rough design. This was then fine-tuned to add scarves and get it ready for paper piecing. Next was to pick the fabric. So what I often do is I lay the background fabric down and then I start putting fabrics on it. So the red and greens on the far right, those had already been selected. They were small scale prints that were going to be the scarves for the snowmen. Then I was playing with all my light blues. The ones that are actually on the fabric in the middle of the shot are the ones that made the cut. Those are the 12s that made it. The ones on the left were rejected, and they were rejected either because they were too light, too dark, or too similar to something that had made the cut. I also, once the pattern is made, that doesn't mean I don't tweak it along the process. So when I made this guy, this is the torso with the 2 stick arms coming out. I didn't like how that one stick was coming out basically from the corner. So I revised the pattern to raise that arm up a little higher so it wouldn't come out of the point. And that is what the final block looks like. And it's on the quilt behind me.
Tina, are you designing an EQ8?
Yes.
Yes to EQ8?
I am not.
Oh, okay.
I am not. I've tried EQ, not a big fan. I do this actually all in Word, which can blow people's minds. That is something I rejected the idea immediately. There was an article in Quilter's newsletter about how to design quilts using Word. And I thought that sounded like the dumbest thing ever. Why would you do that? If anything, I thought Excel would work better than Word. But actually, if you know Word and you use it for all your word processing, what you might not realize is there's a whole bunch of buttons that you never ever use for word processing. You can make patterns like, I mean, this pattern that was made in Word. So that's what allowed me to sell my patterns, because I didn't want to sell any hand-drawn ones. I wanted something that could be replicated and something that could be PDF'd. So that is actually all done in Word, which is pretty darn cool. You can find the article and that can get you started on this. That's what got me started, but then I stumped it. But then the greatest thing is you can Google, how in Word do I make a box? How in Word do I, and someone, God bless them, has either written it down or even put a little video together. So that's how I have been able to produce my quilts or produce my patterns. So this is how the quilt ended up. And then it became part of my trunk show, as well as the focus of my design lecture. And people started asking if the pattern was for sale. And the problem, the thing was, most people only wanted 1 or 2. They wanted the snowman or they wanted the houses. They did not necessarily want everything. My big dilemma was that the pattern was on my computer in about 100 different files. And I couldn't imagine trying to put it all to one pattern. So what I decided to do was, since there was demand, I would address the request by releasing 1 block at a time. So starting in March of 28, I released the snowman block. And then I continued to release 1 every month after that. And I announced it via my free email newsletter that comes out on the 1st of the month. So as of November of 2018, all 9 patterns were available in my shop on Etsy.com. And I put the instructions on how to assemble it all together if someone needed that information on my website. So I remade every single one because I had to make it palatable for other quilters, not just my chicken scratch notes. And in each pattern, I include the instructions on how to make these 18-inch blocks into 20-inch pillows, which is great because some people, very few people want to make the whole quilt, but they might just want to make 1 block. And certainly turning into a holiday pillow is a great idea. What's also been great is that these are now also workshops that I can offer. And so there are several of these I have taught as a workshop to a guilds who want to do a pillow instead of a quilt, so their members aren't just completely overwhelmed. Okay, so after that, this is called Christmas at the Beach. What I made first was at the beach. These 2 quilts were inspired by the photography of a guy by the name of Gray Mallon. He is an American photographer who actually hangs out of the sides of helicopters and takes pictures. And a lot of them are of beaches. So he's got this beautiful coffee table book that's called Beaches, and these beaches around the world. And looking at those photographs, not only were they beautiful and of a subject matter I adore, but I just thought they really lent themselves to a quilt, because you think of an aerial shot of a beach, you've got nothing, it's a mishmash. So it's kind of scrappy to begin with. You've got different colored towels, different umbrellas and such. So I thought it totally lent itself to a quilt. I also noticed from his photographs that the background, you couldn't just have one background because there's water, there's foam, there's wet sand, and there's dry sand. So you can see all 4 of those are in my quilt. So I made the first one called At the Beach, and that pattern's for sale in my shop on Etsy, and that just had regular fabric. This one, when I made it again, has holiday fabrics. And then also what I did in that low row, I blew out some of what had originally been umbrellas and towel setups, and I did what my interpretation is of an aerial view of a palm tree. So on the close-ups, you can see there's an umbrella and towel setup where it's all holiday fabrics. And then there's my aerial view of a palm tree. And I used that green fabric with polka dots on it because I thought it looked like ornaments on a palm tree, which I thought would be appropriate for Christmas at the beach. The next year, it occurred to me that I had never put a tree on top of a car. And so it was time to do that. And if it was going to be on top of a car, it might as well be on top of my car. So I took a photo of my own Prius, and I blew it up and then sliced it up into sections to figure out a paper pattern for it. And then it just became a Trius on my Prius. Originally, there weren't the quilts in the back of the car, but it just looked like there was something missing. So that's why I put quilts in the back. You could see in the close-ups, you can see how I have the flying geese going around the corner. When I wrote about that in my newsletter, and I showed how I did that with, angles and math. And one of my readers was very thankful. She's a math teacher. She said she brought my newsletter in to her class to show, yes, people do use math once they leave school. On the right, you can see there's the quilts that are in the back seat. And it was very appropriate in 2007 that was the picture, because at that time I was in charge of the creation and distribution of charity quilts for my guild. So my Prius often had hundreds of quilts in it. Plus, some people say it looks like there's presents in the back. It's like, well, for a Christmas quilt, that's appropriate as well. Okay, then this one is here in my background. This one made a heck of a lot of noise for me and continues to make noise for me, which is great, good noise. This is a new slant on Christmas. So I'm going to take you through a little bit details on this as well. This was made with regular piecing using a herringbone technique. This pattern is for sale in my shop on Etsy. Let me show you a couple close-ups. You can see I used gold lame once again as the star on top. And then you can also see not only is the tree herringbone, but the background's herringbone. The whole quilt is made in a herringbone method. I started making herringbone quilts in 2018 after seeing a video by Victoria Finley Wolf about how to sew them. The whole key is partial seams. Now, this has been a mystery to me for forever. I stumble upon this because you can't even look up herringbone quilts. She calls it partial seams, and that's how I found the video. If you're interested in the video, there's actually, I have a link to it from the tutorials page on my website, because, and I recommend it to anyone who's interested in this, because it totally opened up my ability to not only make herringbone quilts, but to design them. And I want to point out, people get confused and they think it's a braid quilt. This is a braid quilt where you have those great V's, but then you have those vertical lines in between columns. That's not what I wanted. I wanted a true herringbone. So these are, I make herringbone, my herringbone pattern is called Herringbonanza, and you can make a 40 by 50 quilt or a 20-inch pillow from it. After I'd been cranking these out, I was wondering if you could make a pictorial herringbone quilt and use that as my Christmas card. I actually Googled pictorial herringbone quilt, came up with nothing. And I thought either that means no one's ever done it before or it's a really bad idea, but I figured I was going to try. Could I do it? So in order to design it, I had to come up with a grid. Basically, a herringbone quilt is columns of V's. So I designed first the grid that I was going to design on. And then my first attempt at a tree was really squatty and scruffy. It wasn't working well at all. And you can see I was using full pieces, and that just wasn't working. So what I realized is I'd have to piece a lot of my strips in order to have a smooth edge of a tree. So in making this, I have strips. These strips all finish at 1x4. So that one on the top ends up with a 1x1 inch of green, 3 inches by 1 inches of white. Then you've got the 50-50 with 2 inches of green, 2 inches of white, then 3 inches of green, 1 inch of white, and all 4 inches of green. Because I figured out that I had to segment those, I had to piece my pieces, I ended up with a Christmas tree shape that I liked. Then I had to go on and think, what was I going to do for the tree trunk? I had two options, either the thick trunk on the left or the thinner one on the right. Again, the difference is using that full length of strip or a half, and I like the thinner one better. So I was going to have to piece all of those and have those strips half white, half brown. Then with the base, did I want a wide base or a skinnier base? I thought the wider base just looked more sturdy. I didn't want to look like my tree was tipping over. So I went with a wider base. Then similar to the trunk, if I was going to put lights on the trees, you could either do it in a full strip, or really, I thought it looked better on the right, where it was each of those strips was half of a light color and half green background. And lastly, the star on top of the tree. I had a more elaborate one on the left and a smaller one on the right, but I thought the smaller one on the right really was more in proportion to the rest of the elements. So that was the tree I ended up with. And then this is how it was going to be sewn. So again, these are columns of V's. You make all the columns first, and then you sew them together. The way this one was laid out, you could see the first and last column are all background fabric, and then it's between 2 and 8 where the tree shows up. So let me show you how this sews to, oh wait, first let's talk about the fabric I used. I used a mix of, I think more than 30 green fabrics to make the tree, because I do love the scrappy look. And similarly, I used almost 20 white fabrics for a textured background. The fact that that whole background was going to be pieced, I thought it'd be silly if I used the same fabric. People would say, why did you bother cutting it up and just sewing back together? I thought it was far more interesting if it was white fabrics or white on white fabrics or white with just a little bit of color. And this is how it goes together. So these are the first two columns. The first column was all background fabric. Then the tree starts in the second column. And then there's column 3 added, column 4, column 5. That's the middle column of the 9, 6, 7, and then 8 and 9 is how it goes together. And then that's the final quilt.
As for, how did you quilt it?
Well, here next,
Oh.
what a perfect intro. I like the look of matchstick quilting. You've probably seen that on a lot of modern quilts, but again, that takes a heck of a lot of time and a lot of thread, and I'm up against a mailing deadline. So what I did is on the right, because all my strips were 1 inch wide, I decided I would basically quilt a 1/4 inch from each one of those seams. That would end up with 1/2 inch strips or rows of quilting. So I nicknamed that breadstick quilting. Not as thin as a matchstick, more like the width of a breadstick. So that is how I quilted that one. So I named it A New Slant on Christmas because everything's at a 45-degree angle. And at least I learned from the past, unlike with Wreath-A-Rama, I crafted the pattern as I made the quilt. So actually the pattern was available when the quilt debuted. And so it debuted in my December 2018 newsletter with a link to buy it on my Etsy shop. And I sold a few patterns, which was nice. Then the funny thing was on December 9th of that year, I woke up to my cell phone going ka-ching, 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 and it actually makes that noise. That is the Etsy app on my phone. Anytime anyone buys something off my Etsy site, my phone literally makes the cash register sound. What it turned out, what happened was Quilting Digest, if you know them on Facebook, they put up a photo of my quilt with a link to the pattern listing on Etsy. And I sold more than 100 copies in that first 24 hours, more than 300 that December. And I'm over 1,500 copies or so to date. What's great is this thing sells year round because it sells a lot at Christmas time when people are thinking about Christmas, but it also sells in other times of the year when people are planning to start making something for Christmas. So it is available for sale on my shop on Etsy.com. And this is its companion piece. I did this the following year. So I took the inspiration of the star from on top of the Christmas tree, and I thought, you know what if I did a couple of variations of that and they were snowflakes? I could have a bunch of different snowflakes, different designs of snowflakes, different sizes of snowflakes. But then I remembered, well, wait a minute, I'm supposed to have at least one tree. So I put the stand of trees at the bottom, and I think actually it's better having the stand of trees at the bottom than not having it. But this is made exactly that same herringbone technique. Again, this one is also on sale in my shop on Etsy. Let me show you some close-ups. So here you can see that's the stand of trees up close in the bottom corner, made in the herringbone technique. And there you see also some of the snowflakes. This is the plan going in. Unlike the Christmas tree, this image goes right to the edges. So I don't have a full column of background on either side like I did. And I can show you how these 9 go together. So you can see the stand of trees and the snowflakes start in the first one. And then that's column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, column 6, column 7, column 8, and column 9.
Breadstick again?
Pardon me?
Breadstick quilting again? How'd you quilt it?
Yes, I did. I had to look. Breadstick again. So again, it debuted in my December newsletter, the first of that month. Quilters Digest, bless their hearts, featured it again, and there was a small frenzy of pattern sales. And every time, what's great about these patterns, every time someone puts up on Facebook, there's a bit of a frenzy. So that's what's lovely. There's always someone new out there who hasn't seen it. So then that brings me to my most recent Christmas quilt, which is Countdown to Christmas. I figured that of any year, 2020 was a year that certainly people want to count down and get rid of. So I was playing with like a stand of trees. I thought if I had 25 trees, then that would be the countdown to Christmas. I was playing around with triangles, and I realized, here, let me show you up close. I realized that if I kept the center triangle that was upside down, if I kept it in one piece and lined it, that could be a pocket. And I figured, you can see I put in little mini candy canes, but you could put in little notes, or I thought fine jewelry or something like that, and count down to Christmas. Then I had the dilemma of how was I going to number the trees, because they all need to be numbered from 1 to 25. And of course I could do embroidery. There was a whole bunch of ideas. I actually came up with this one, and in the picture on the upper right, if you've ever been to a gym or a spa where you get a locker key and you get that little bungee bracelet with that number, that is a locker, numbered locker tag, and they're for sale on Etsy or on Amazon. So I found the set that I used because it was perfect. They needed to be numbered. They were actually, it doesn't show up as well in this photo, but they're reflective gold. So they're absolutely perfect, because you can see I also use gold lame in the border of this quilt, as well as on top of all the trees. So that was the going in plan. That is the end result. As for 2021, my friends who know I do this have already been asking. At this point, I'm really mulling ideas for this year's quilt. I haven't committed to anything yet, but I have to get serious. And usually it's in August that I hammer out the plan, and then I got to start making it. So what I've been doing, because I haven't been working on my quilt, I wanted to let you folks know that besides the guild classes I offer, I do offer now Zoom classes. I have 2 of them this month, later this month, the California Poppies and the Herring Bonanza. So that is not pictorial, but that's a great way to learn the technique of how a herringbone quilt goes together. These are over Zoom, of course. And then I have 2 more scheduled for August. Whimsical Garden, which is one of my most popular workshops, and then Sought After Neighborhood, another popular one.
Tina, is Whimsical Garden applique?
It is, let me go back. It is a pieced background and then raw edge applique foreground for flowers that you've either cut out of, like formed out of your own fabrics, or literally cut out of a floral fabric. And then the stems are just green fabrics.
And California Poppies is paper pieced?
California Poppies is paper pieced.
Cool.
And that, of course, could be in any color combo. Because I'm from California, I did in the traditional orange, but I taught this once and someone made the flowers teal with a gray background, and that came out really cool. So obviously anything goes. Last thing I wanted to mention was I do have a free monthly email newsletter. This comes out the first of the month. It basically tracks my quilting adventures. Usually when I'm in person, I have a clipboard, but you can either sign up on my website or just send me an email asking me to add you to the list, which I'm happy to do. My email is tina@tinacurran.com. And let me give you the rest of my contact info. My website is tinacurran.com. My Etsy shop, you can put in tinacurran.etsy.com, or you can just go to Etsy and type in the search bar Tina Curran and my stuff pops up. As a thank you to all of you, what I want to do is offer a 25% discount on any of the PDF versions of all my digital patterns, not just the Christmas ones, but all of them. There's, I think, over 30. This code, IAQ July, is for your members, and it's good today, tomorrow, and Sunday for a 25% discount, again, off all those PDF versions of any of my quilt patterns. With that, are there any questions?
I don't know. I think I politely interrupted you. You could become
very
an
politely.
auctioneer. You could become an auctioneer because you are a fast talker, and I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, my questions were about the EQ, but you answered those. The other one was like, you've mentioned your applique method. Do you typically do raw edge, or do you do needle turn or anything else? I love raw edge, so I'm a big fan of that. So just wondering if that's your favorite and what you lean.
I'm a big fan of raw edge. I do the fusible on the back first, iron it down, and then almost always go over it with a clear thread and a zigzag stitch. When I do that whimsical garden class, all those stems and flowers, I go around all of it that way with, after fusing it all down, I do clear thread and a zigzag stitch. I do tell my students though, I'm not going to come to your house and make sure you did that. If it's just going to hang in your front hall closet or front hallway, no one's going to touch it, you don't have to do that step. My stuff travels around for trunk shows, and also that gives it a nice 3-dimensional effect because the edges are down and like the center of the flowers pop up a little. So I think it's a nice textural thing, but it's not mandatory.
And Tina, you must work really fast because the consensus is if everyone started in August, they couldn't get it done by Christmas.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because people ask me like, how long did it take you to make that quilt? It's like, well, you don't understand because I had to make the pattern too. And I had to think it all up. And I maybe change my mind. So the first ones take a heck of a lot of time to make. If I ever make them again, gosh, I just use the pattern and they go a heck of a lot faster.
Do you use clear thread in the bobbin?
I do. Some people think that's weird. I don't ever want to mess with my tension, so I think it works fine. And I have a Bernina. It doesn't have any issues with that. I also recommend to people, because I know some machines really aren't big fans of clear thread. One of the tips I tell people is, even if you have a small spool, don't put it on the top of your machine. Get it off your machine and put it on a stand, because it seems like clear thread really needs a long run to behave the best it can. It's better if it has a long run before it actually goes into your quilt.
Mine was, I also had a question, like, do you prefer paper piecing, applique, traditional, or is it just dependent on the design and what technique is going to work best for what you want to accomplish?
I'm open to almost anything. I do like paper piecing, and I like designing in paper piecing because I can get really, like, all of these pillows. Like, let me get this one. So this is, now let me hook myself back up. So this is the snowman pillow. And you could get a snowman that looks okay with regular piecing, but in order to get something that looks like this dynamic, has this much shape to it and movement to it, otherwise they kind of look like, scarecrows or something, just like a stiff snowman. But I think you can just get such a better shape with paper piecing. And it's, people have problems with, I don't want to take all the paper out. You know what? I don't mind that so much. I think that's perfect to do while watching television and end up with like the little snowstorm of paper all around me. But yeah, I like that, but I do like these herringbone too. Because some people, especially guilds, some people, when they come shop for a workshop, they're like, oh, my guild doesn't do paper piecing, or all we want to do is paper piecing. It's amazing how that really, there's a big divide among quilters about paper piecing. I'm a big fan. I think there are cons, but the pros far outweigh the cons. But it's cool that you can get a pictorial going using a herringbone method as well, as long as you have the right pattern.
Is the snowflake herringbone tough? Is it a pay attention sewing quilt? Just because of the color placement?
I think, yeah, you know what, it's basically light blues. So again, it's similar, it goes together similar to this one. So you do have to piece some of the sections, but as long as I just used a bunch of light blues that I thought played nicely together, and I don't think I spent too much time thinking about it.
I would never think that was herringbone. I would have thought it was paper pieced. If you hadn't
Nope.
showed us,
Yep.
that's impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, and those, it's funny because those patterns, basically, it's almost like a paint by numbers. When I wrote those patterns, I actually have color-coded diagrams as to where everything goes, because that's what's really necessary. And I get lovely comments about how well my patterns are written, and that's because I like to get patterns that are well written, and I don't want to have confused people.
All right, nice. Any other questions from anybody? Tina, you were amazing.
Why, thank you. Thanks for having me. And thank you.
Yeah, delightful.
I wanted to remind everyone that that code IAQ July is good through Sunday. And if anyone's a guild member, I'm available to talk at guilds as well, whether it's over Zoom or in person. I'm based in Southern California, so if it's out of California, probably it would be over Zoom. But I do lectures and I do workshops, and people seem to like my stuff.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Your stuff is beautiful.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Tina.
Enjoy the rest of your Christmas in July.
Yes, thank you.
Oh boy,
Okay.
expensive week continues.
Oh, Peggy, she's bought the snowman. Okay.
Yeah, Peggy.
I like it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave you now. Thank you,
Thank
ladies.
you, Tina.
Thank you, Tina.
Bye. Have good weekends.
You too.